Hi, my name is Jean Hally. I am the company manager for Druid Theatre Company.
Hi, Jean. How are you?
I'm good, thanks.
So, Jean, how does one end up as a company manager of Druid? I mean, I know you've kind of worked as a stage manager for many years before that, but kind of when you were younger, was that kind of in your head? Not Druid, obviously, but like was a life in the theatre kind of what you wanted to do when you were young?
Not necessarily. When I was in secondary school, I wanted to be a film director. I was a big fan of Baz Luhrmann. I still am, and he was kind of my thing. I was like, I'm going to be Baz Luhrmann when I grow up. And then I went to I did lots of kind of when I was in school. I did drama, and I did a film course in the Gaiety when I was about 16 over a summer that I loved. So I was always good. Like, I wasn't necessarily a drama kid. I've never been a sort of an actor. I never wanted to do that. Sort of being front of house terrifies me a little bit. But so I never kind of thought I was going to be on the stage, but I always kind of was interested in sort of the making of theatre and the making of film and stuff. And as I say, when I was sort of 12, 13, it was the film industry that I wanted to do and to be in. And then I did my Leaving Cert, and I thought I was going to go and do film studies in English in Trinity, and it was the first year of that course, and the points were sky high, and I didn't get them. And I ended up in UCD doing an arts degree, and found myself downstairs in the basement in the LGs, which I believe you were as well at one point.
Yes, I think that's the story of many people's lives.
Yeah,
But come here,
exactly.
talk to me about Baz Luhrmann. How did that kind of come about? Was there any one particular film, or was it just kind of?
Well, I was 12 in 1997, so Leonardo DiCaprio and Romeo and Juliet was all the rage. But as well, I mean, I was a massive fan at the time of Strictly Ballroom, because we ended up doing that in school at one point. Actually, I think we did it for our Leaving Cert. I mean, I still do. I just love his style and his sort of way of filmmaking, and I was obsessed with Moulin Rouge, and they were all they came out in my very formative years, and I just loved the style and the kind of the razzmatazz of them all.
Yeah, but it was the making of them though that interested you as well, wasn't it? Not the,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
And
mean, like probably the style, it was what drew me in, and then I ended up buying the DVDs and watching every single extra on it, and
yeah,
I mean, I've always been a bit of a kind of a behind the scenes nerd. I mean, I even still I've been a stage manager. I was freelance for 10 years, and I would still sort of find YouTube clips of people calling really interesting shows and really big shows. One of my favorite clips actually that you can find. The stage manager of Hamilton on Broadway did a sequence where he called the sequence live, and that's just like
wow.
theatre nerdery to me. Yeah, yeah. And
No, sorry, that's a whole new world. I didn't realize that those.
yeah, and there's also an amazing one which is like I worked in opera a bit over the years, and there's this amazing piece of footage from the Royal Opera House which has cameras on loads of different aspects, and they have a camera on the DSM calling the ring cycle, which is like one of the
Wow.
biggest operas. And so it's this like hour-long piece of footage of this woman calling, I think it's the first act of the ring cycle or something, and
What are you watching?
you're watching everything. So there's a camera on her talking, but there's also a camera on, like, so she's calling all the cues. There's a camera on
Oh,
all of the tracks backstage, the lights, the pyro, all the stuff.
wow.
Yeah, it's really fast. I'll send it on to you. It's amazing. But like,
Guess what
it's
I'm going to be doing this evening on YouTube?
yeah. I'll email it to you later. But it's like, it's the sort of stuff that theatre nerds like me just love, because like, when I was like, this isn't going back that far, but like when I started as a stage manager, like it's always the scale, for me it's like, like, we'll get onto that, but like working for Druid as well, it's the same, it's the scale of doing something big is the really exciting thing. It's one of the things actually that when I went to Druid, when I took on the job as a company manager, I kind of said, well, I'll be doing lots of big scale shows, which is great, but I won't ever get to do opera for the time being. And I loved working on opera. You're talking about, I mean, at the moment it's very difficult to do, but you're talking about big casts and big companies and a big orchestra and like 20 people on the crew, and you know, it's all like, it's that sort of stuff that I just love, you know.
So then when you were in school and secondary school and then heading on wanted to do film, and then when the film studies didn't work out for you, when you went down to the drama society, what kind of, like, you know, was it kind of definitely not going to be front stage? Was it definitely, it wasn't, there's no way?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was always back behind the scenes. And actually I started off doing a bit of lighting. The reason I kind of got involved initially was that a girl that I knew from primary school, I met sitting in an English lecture, and she beside me, and she had all these like cut up pieces of gel, and I sort of said, "What are you doing? What's that?" And said she had been taken on as the tech manager at Dramstock that year, and she said, "Oh, I'm going down to rig some lights for a show, and you know, oh, actually, we need some people over the weekend. We need some bodies to come in, and will you come in?" And I'm like, "Have nothing else on," so I went down and sort of decided quite quickly that actually it was directing that I wanted to get involved in, and so I did a little bit of lighting, and we all kind of, everybody sort of operated the lights in the show, you know, everyone took a turn. So the lighting programming was never the same from one night to the next, because we never programmed it into the board in the way that most people would do, you know, when you just hit a go button and the cue runs. It was always done on faders. It was like very haphazard, but listen, we made it work. And like I often say now, you know, I mean, my degree is philosophy, my undergrad degree is a philosophy degree, but like I spent more time down in Dramstock than I did in my lectures, for sure. And like, you know, I joke with my parents now, but actually like Dramstock was my degree, you know, it's where I learned my trade, you know, we did things with spit and sawdust, and we learned on the job, and we taught each other what we knew. I mean, I'm sure you remember that as well, you know. And eventually, after a weekend of tech and rehearsals, you managed to put something up on a Monday night. It's kind of incredible, like when I think about it now.
There's a bit of kind of struck by, you know, Zen and the art of stage management, you know. You kind of have
Totally.
But I think Dramstock, you know, to go in there, you need patience as well as the kind of the chutzpah or chutzpah. Can I ask you then, just, you mentioned the kind of the directing piece. So like, how long did that stay with you? Like, you know, when was the movement back, or is it still with you?
No, it's not with me anymore, but it's quite interesting. Like I directed 4 big shows in Dramstock, which was kind of amazing, because not everybody like I did 4 shows over 4 years in there with them, which was amazing. And then I actually did a master's in directing. I have a master's from UCD. So it was still with me then. And then I kind of, you know, I did my year as my master's, and it was great, but I did everything in UCD, and I had taken a year out because I was on the committee in Dramstock for a year, and took some time out to earn some money so that I could do my master's and all that sort of thing. So I was on the committee and working full time after my degree. And then I had lived at home, and I had done all my stuff in UCD, and I just kind of thought, well, I want out of Dublin. So I upped and I moved to London, just because and I got a job in a call centre, and eventually kind of thought, well, I need to do something to get involved in theatre, and I got involved with an amazing company. They're an amateur dramatics company in West London. They're called Questers, and I rocked up again one night. Rocked up on a kind of an open evening, and the stage manager from there grabbed me, and she said, "We need a DSM for a show." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Well, I don't really know what a DSM does, but if you can take me under your wing and show me, I have no problem doing it." So she kind of took me on board, and I did a production of Les Liaisons Dangereuses with them, and learned how to do a book. I'd never done one before. I kind of job shared with this guy, and he kind of showed me how to do a book, and I did a couple more shows with them as an ASM. So I was in London for a year, and then at this stage I was like, well, maybe I was kind of thinking, I was like, you know, looking back on shows that I had directed in UCD, and thought actually a lot of what I did was stage managing. Like I still have copies of the scripts that I directed, and I have all the blocking in them that I wrote down myself. Because when it's different now, I think, like even in UCD now, and I remember at the time, Trinity players and stuff were a little bit different, but we didn't have stage managers in UCD at the time. We all just kind of did the show. Nobody called the show. The lighting operator just did the lights, and whoever was doing costumes just did the costumes, and we all kind of just mucked in. So I didn't even know what a stage manager was. And then I had this mad woman called Jane who said to me, "Do you want to DSM?" And I just thought, well, I want to be involved, so great. And then I was getting a bit homesick and a bit sort of, thinking I might come home. And I got a phone call from a very good friend of mine who I'm still very good friends with, who works in the industry, Owen Kilkenny, who was on Rough Magic Seeds that year as their production manager. And he rang me and he said, "We need an ASM. There's not very much money. We'll cover your costs, but do you want it?" And I said, "Yeah." And I upped and I moved home within a couple of weeks, left London, and ASM'd on 2 shows in rep that Rough Magic did that year for Seeds, and then kept going. And now I'm 11 years later.
Yeah, I mean, that's gas. I mean, first of all, that's a massive step to go to London. That's and then to re-immerse yourself back in it and kind of come back. I mean, I'll come back to the directing thing in a minute, but I mean, since then you said you're right. You've kind of you've been kind of working a lot, and I think I find that fascinating though when you mentioned there about looking back on stuff you directed in college. But it's something that you really kind of obviously wanted to do, and something that you thought you wanted to do, and yet as you grew into your career, you kind of went, "Oh, maybe that's what I want." Because I've worked with many stage managers over the years. In fact, we've worked together. But like the idea that I just love the idea of the book. I just think it's just for anyone that doesn't work in the theater, as a director and as an actor, as a company, to have that kind of Bible of the show. Where basically it's a repository of everything, good and bad. But I think, from formulating a career or a student career as a director, and then realizing that you had all these skills that were integral that you were going to use later on, and is that something that kind of we went, "Oh, I just started kind of coming back and doing the Seeds, and kind of I just started developing on as an ASM." Did you kind of go, "Well, actually, this comes naturally to me, this kind of organizational piece"?
Yeah, I think so. And what I have found in my career since, that actually doing the masters in directing has helped me as a stage manager as well, because it's a really interesting combination of the two, I think, because by doing a course or a master's in directing as a stage manager, you kind of understand the psyche of a director a little bit, which is obviously very helpful. But then realizing probably halfway through that master's that actually my skill set is absolutely the organizational stuff, and as I say, kind of looking back then on the stuff that I had done in college, I was there going, well, I was kind of already doing this anyway. I was already doing what I'm now doing, not realizing that I was doing it.
Yeah, but you're right. But I mean, to have that skill set, to have that knowledge, and to have gone through that kind of academic piece in relation to theatre directing, it does give you, a different eye naturally. Absolutely. And then by training into your job. And I mean, I think, it is about organization, obviously, but I think one of the great things, I think during this time of COVID, which is kind of happening, is maybe barriers coming down between the different contexts or different areas of the art of theatre making. And, I think even roles like, production management and company management, and these kind of, the roles will always were always there, but I think they're evolving more, that you talk to any director, and a good stage manager or that relationship is worth gold.
100%. I think as well what's happening at the moment is really interesting, because I think, as you say, as a director or as an actor, to have that Bible is a really, what I think is happening at the moment is that a lot of people that normally wouldn't be in the limelight are kind of coming to the fore a little bit. So like the stuff that all the people involved in Epic are doing in terms of work, so people are beginning to, for want of a better phrase, understand what people do better, and therefore people are able to utilize people's skills better. So there's a lot of people that would say, well, I know I know there's a production manager on every show, but I don't really know what they do, or what are they doing when they're not like wandering around during tech? Like, what's their actual role? And some people have been in the industry for a long time don't even know the answer to that, but they're at the point where they're too embarrassed to ask, maybe, or And I think with all of this conversation that's happening around COVID and around the industry at the moment, that actually it's great, because it's not only solidifying the community that we have, but also helping people to understand what the people that they might not know very much about their jobs day to day and what they do, which is really important for just day to day work as well as everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk to me then. After you came back and you did the Rough Magic, what were you kind of going, right, this is now what I want to do? Yeah.
This is it. Yeah. And I mean, I was, like, what I find incredible is that, and they're very lucky, people that know what they want to do, that are coming out of school and going straight into the Lear for their degree or whatever, and they're coming out with a degree in technical theatre or stage management at 22 or 23. I was 25 when I came back from London, and I was only starting, maybe more, 26 I think, and I was only starting in my career, at 26, whereas you have people now who are at 22 starting their career and really getting dug in, and getting the opportunity to work with really established directors while they're still in college and create those relationships. Whereas I came back, I knew nobody, I had no formal training, and I was just kind of a bit dogged, and took every job that was going, whether it paid me or it didn't, and did my fair share of profit share and all that sort of stuff at the beginning, and just worked and stayed at home longer than I should have, because my lovely parents allowed me to stay there with no rent. I have to say that's watch it later. So I mean, I was very lucky in that I had parents, like, I grew up in Dublin, so I didn't have to sort of rent a place in Dublin to be here to work. My parents allowed me to stay at home, as I say, longer than I should have. And any career at the start is a hard graft, but a theatre career, when you really don't know very many people, is a real hard graft. And you have to just, as I say, take every job that's going and talk to all the people and go to the opening nights, and
that's hard. I mean, that kind of, no matter what area of theatre you're in, to actually do that networking, and because it's a very personal thing, and no matter what level you're at, it's still hard. And did you find, like, I suppose at that stage, when I say going for kind of profit shares, doing lots of different work, also working with lots of different people.
Yeah.
And I say that's really, as a stage manager beginning, learning your ropes by, in some ways being the Kamai in a storm in loads of different people's arenas can be very, very interesting.
Absolutely. And as you say, when you work with different people, you realize the things that different people do, that either that you think is a good idea or that you think is a bad idea, or you see the way one director deals with one thing and another director deals with another thing, or production manager, or yourself even. You put yourself in different situations, and as a stage manager, you are expected to be the calm in the eye of the storm, but sometimes in your brain you're kind of going crazy, and you have to and you have to keep your mouth shut for the most part, or at least you should. Sometimes you might not want to, but I think that that's really important as well, as learning kind of as a stage manager and as a person in an industry that can be quite heightened a lot of the time, what sets you off, what you're willing to put up with, all these things. And I'm still learning that, I think everybody is. And I think the day that you think that you have it all and this is just the way that I work, that's the day that you should pack up and go home.
Well, any time that I've ever thought like that, the next day always gave me a rude awakening. But also, Jean, the sense as well, though, as you're kind of developing your skill set and your career, I'm often fascinated by from knowing a lot of stage managers and chatting to them about, like, you are in, obviously when a director's in many rooms, but they're always there with themselves. They're always kind of directing the show. but you that have been in the room with many directors, I imagine sometimes sitting there going, oh, not so much the nature of the show, but kind of going, yeah, this is going to go that way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you know, I think a good stage manager will always sit there and go, I know what's going to happen here. And at the end of the day, I mean, I think somebody that does what we do, you should never be reactionary. You should always know what's going to happen, and you should always have played out each of the 5 scenarios that could possibly happen. And then when scenario B happens, you go, okay, great, that's the one we're doing today. This is the fight that's going to happen today, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas as a stage manager, if you're reacting to stuff, you're on the back foot already, you know. So I think it's really important to kind of, and I think it's really important to be able to read personality types. I think that's a huge part of the job, you know, so that like, and I mean, I'm always prepared to be proven wrong about people and whatever, but I do think as stage managers, we, it's not that we make snap judgments about people, but you know, you can look at somebody very quickly and go, okay, you're going to be this kind of director, or like, I know how to deal with you in this situation, you know. And I think that that's really important. And I mean, that these things change as well, you know, and you know, on this job it might be that way, and on another job it might be another way, but it's a, you know,
well,
again, very adaptable.
Always knew the stage managers are the master manipulators of the theatre industry. You know, they're kind of they're pulling the strings on everybody in that room.
Oh, you figured that one out, did you? That's a big secret. Nobody's supposed to know that.
I'll put this bit out. So then, I mean, obviously you ended up kind of doing a lot of work in the Abbey then, you know. What was your kind of journey into there, Jean? What was kind of, had you done kind of shows that went in there, or had you been associated?
No, I was in a lot of ways very lucky. I credit John Stapleton with a lot of my career, if I'm honest. I think a lot of people do. I sent John an email off the bat with a CV that, you know, was varied, but not, you know, I had never worked in the Abbey. I had done a few bits and bobs that were kind of good and whatever, but John just said, listen, come in and have a chat to me. And, you know, we met and we had a cup of coffee, and it wasn't even a formal interview. And he just said, listen, tell me about yourself and all that stuff. And asked me what I wanted to be doing in 5 years and where I wanted to be, and da, da, da. And I mean, my thing at the time, and it still is one of my favorite parts of the job, is DSMing. I love being in the room. I love that relationship between a DSM and the director. I think it's one, as you say, one of the most important relationships. And I suppose as well with my sort of masters and that sort of thing, like I love scripts, I love, you know, making the book, I love being in the room watching the process happen and that sort of thing. And then at the end of the day, you know, and this is the control freak in me, I love calling shows. I like, it's, you know, the buzz of calling a live show is like no other. I mean, for the stage manager, it's like the same for an actor. It's being in front of an audience. It's, you know, doing the thing. And when you get a cue just right, you know, particularly when you get a difficult cue just right, it's just, the buzz of that is great. But I said to John, I said, listen, I said, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be in the room, and I want to be on the book and calling shows and whatever. And did a couple of shows as an ASM, and then he moved me very quickly through as the DSM. And then, you know, I ended up calling and DSMing Anna Karenina in there, which I will never forget Carl Shields saying to me one night, he said, you're now wearing the green jersey. He said, you're on the main stage in the Abbey and you're wearing the green jersey in what you do, that's what you're doing. And I think I heard him say that to other people as well. But like, it was kind of the thing of like, you're working for your national theatre, you're sort of the pinnacle of what we do in this country, you know. And that was great. And I mean, I remember the opening night, or well, it wasn't even the opening, it was probably the first preview, because as a stage manager by opening night, you're kind of over it. You know, it's always the first preview that's a really scary one for me anyway. I still get nervous on the first preview, but yeah, that was a really special one. Like, you know, to call a show on the main stage in the Abbey is cool. Like, it's, you know.
I mean, it's interesting you say there though as well that, you know, the fact of the live thing, because that's not spoken about a lot in relation to calling shows and, you know, because I still remember I talked to Yeah, stage managers I've worked with about kind of cues that I remember from shows, sometimes more than the show itself. But it's also that kind of, I just love the frustration of the cue going perfectly from the stage management, but might can be caught right in time by the light. And that's brilliant, because that's music. That's kind of, there's a whole score there that
Yeah.
and it's an invisible score. And it's only when it becomes visible that it's gone horribly, horribly wrong, or that it's meant to be, or that it's kind of. But I think that sense of, that's a great way of phrasing it. That, like, that's your live, that's your acting, that's your being on stage, that's your moment, and which I would find absolutely fucking horrendously scary.
Yeah. But it's funny, like I've been with Druid now for 2 years, or nearly 2 years as their company manager. I still every night, because I'm, as part of my job, I'm there on show call every night. I don't do 9 to 5. I am actually with the show from beginning to end. I still find a little spot in each theatre and watch the curtain call every night.
Wow.
And it's my little ritual that I have with myself, but I have a point in the show where I either, like, there's a spot in the town hall that I know of, there's a spot in the black box that I know of, that I can see the audience and I get the buzz of the applause. And not only do I obviously have to report about it in the show report, but for me it's like that little thing of, okay, I know how the audience felt watching it, and I know. And the other thing is that, like, the cast will come off after their bow or whatever, and some people will say, "Oh, that was a lovely reaction." So I like to know what the reaction was, so that if somebody says, "What did you think?" whatever, at least I've heard the reaction properly.
Are you're not still twitching on every cue? Like, you're not sort of,
No, because for the most part, if I'm not calling a show, I don't really know what the cues are, if I'm honest. I mean, Sophie Flynn has been working with Druid as a DSM for a long time, and she's on it, so I trust her implicitly.
Go back to the wonderful John Stapleton then, and that kind of journey, the Abbey, and I mean, you kind of, there's a huge amount of shows that you did in the Peacock, and then as you say on the Abbey stage, and so very, very, very different work that had been kind of extant before it came in, and work that was made kind of in there. And is there a huge difference, Gene, in that? You know what I mean? It's like work that's coming into you as a receiving venue, and then work that you're kind of part of.
Yes, I think so. I mean, I did a 6-month stint in the Abbey, I'd say, where I was down to Peacock babysitting, as we would say. I was sort of, I mean, I suppose the official title would probably be like a venue tech, or like, it is stage manager, but you're basically there as a representative of the venue. And I did a 6-month stint where, oh God, Dead Centre came in with Lippy, and Michael Murphy came in with Man and Woman Shoes, and some really lovely stuff. And but you're very hands off. At the end of the day, you're there as a representative of the theatre to make sure that nothing goes wrong, or if the incoming company, have a question, you're there to answer that question. But you don't have anything to do with the running of the show, because more often than not, they've come in and the show's ready to go, and they just superimpose it onto the stage in the Abbey, or in the Peacock rather, and it's done. And they come in generally with their own stage manager, so that's all that sort of stuff is done. But yeah, it's different because you're kind of on the outside, I mean, I always, my favorite type of a show to work on is something that you're on from day one all the way to the last night, because you develop relationships within a company. Whereas if you come in onto something, like I've come in as an ASM on things, and you don't start until Tech Week, or like the week before Tech Week, and you kind of always feel a little bit on the back foot, because people have spent 3 or 4 weeks in rehearsal getting to know each other and going for pints, or and you're kind of coming in going, "Hi guys, I'm new," and you don't have that base relationship maybe with people that has developed over 4 weeks in the room.
Around that, when did the opera then kind of come in to your kind of field? What was?
2011, I think, was my first opera that I did. I did. I've done 4 seasons down in Wexford at the Opera Festival in Wexford, and I did 3 years as an ASM, and then I did a what they call the Short Works, which was a co-production of Dubliners, and so we did that both down in Wexford and then in the Sam Beckett.
Yeah.
Opera was kind of just something that I was always kind of a bit interested in. My parents are big opera buffs. They have been going to Wexford since I was a kid. And again, the same as John, I just sent an email down and I said, here, give us a job, will you? And sort of took a couple of goes of it and a couple of like sending the email to the wrong person and getting it bounced back, and then somebody saying, oh yeah, no worries, I'll pass it on to the right person. And eventually, I don't remember what show it was I was rehearsing, but I remember being in team and getting a phone call from the production manager at Wexford, and did a phone interview, and he kind of questioned me about this and that, and I sort of said, listen, I've never done opera before, but I can read music, and really just would love to have a go kind of thing. So I was down, and then, like I say, we did 3 years back to back down there, and then took a little bit of a break, and actually went into the Abbey. I had this horrible decision one year to make, where I had been offered a gig at Wexford, and then John Stapleton came into me with, I think it was Anna Karenina actually, and I sort of went, God, I have to pick, but getting to call a show on the Abbey main stage. And I picked. So and then I did go back to Wexford, and then I went back and I did Dubliners as stage manager. But like I said earlier, I still miss working on opera. I love the buzz of work. It's just a different scale, even when you're doing a small opera. And like we did Dubliners, which was, a small cast opera wise, and it was only a little chamber orchestra, and Andrew Sinnott, who had composed it, also played the piano and conducted, so like it was like, in the grand scheme of things, it was small, but there's a certain buzz, and I love music generally in my life, so like, the fact that I don't do opera, I'm hoping Gary Hines might do one someday, that I can tag along with.
I mean, a couple of things there. I mean, I was assistant director 20 years ago with Opera Ireland as it was, and I remember I still remember vividly the first opera I was on. They used to rehearse down in the factory down in down the quays and down the docks, but there was a big huge room, and there was a pianist and about 40 singers, and you're sitting there at the table going, no one gets to see this, this, that sort of, and the energy coming off it is just incredible. Tell me about you and music, though. You can read music. You play music?
No, I don't. I sang in choirs as a kid, so my music is all, again, self-taught. I was involved in what was called Corn and Og, as a kid, which was when I was in primary school, and then when I went into secondary school, Sean Kramer was the man who since died a few years ago, just the most wonderful man. So he set up Corn and Og, and then when I was in secondary school, he did a secondary schools version called the Dublin Secondary Schoolgirls Choir, which I got involved in my school. And then out of that, I joined a choir called Park Singers when I was in third year in secondary school, which were a small choir that sort of competed, and we traveled around Europe, and we did a few competitions and stuff when I was with them. And I was with them all the way up until I went to college, and then I had to pick between drama and choir, and drama won. Drama won out on that one. But and actually, again, I still miss singing in a choir. I would love, it's something that kind of is on the very long finger for when I retire, maybe, but much like anybody that works in theatre, I can't commit to a choir rehearsal once a week or twice a week, so, and I would hate to sort of make that commitment and then let people down or whatever. But singing in a choir, again, it's that sort of group activity, it's just a really lovely thing to do. And I know there's some people involved. There's a kind of a drop-in choir that happens in Dublin. I think it happens lots of places, but I've always kind of thought maybe I'll do it, but then something else gets in the way, work happens or show call happens or whatever.
Better put it out now, Jean, into a wider universe. You never know what phone calls you'll get after this.
Yeah, we'll see.
I can just not noticing the picture behind me of cleaners. That's not there on purpose.
I actually saw that in one of the interviews that you did a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh, look, there's that.
That was 2000 and God, 15, 16, somewhere. It's not.
Yeah, yeah.
But did you? I mean, did you do a lot of freelancing? I mean, during the time of the Abbey as well, or was it back to back into the Abbey? Was it?
Well, there was a time, as I say, that I did a lot back to back in the Abbey, and actually, I remember a couple of people meeting people, and they were like, "But you're full time in the Abbey now," and I was like, "No, I'm not. I'm still a freelance. I mean, I'm working a lot in the Abbey, but I'm, please don't forget me. I'm still a freelancer." And then because I had worked in London, I did a couple of opera festivals and stuff over in the UK, and then because I'd lived in London after my degree, people would come up to me and say, "But you're living in England now." And I'd be like, "No, I did a gig for like 3 months over there. I was just a freelance opera show. Like, it's don't forget me." So yeah, it's that very sort of scary thing as a freelancer. It happens to, like, I've had conversations with pals of mine, it happens a lot, whereby obviously you want to take the work, and if the Abbey or Druid or whoever, Landmark, Rough Magic, if you're getting back-to-back gigs with somebody, it's great, and you've developed a relationship and you want the work, whatever, but you run the risk of somebody going, "Oh, she works with Druid, like that, she's full-time, or she's full-time with the Abbey." And most freelancers, particularly stage managers, they're not, and actors aren't, and and like, you kind of run that thing of, well, I don't want to be forgotten by everybody, but also I have to take the back-to-back work in the Abbey or wherever you are. So that's when it's really important to be going to all the opening nights and everything, because you have to be walking around going, "I'm not full-time here, I'm just here for the moment," and like, I know people, like I fell into that, where you're there going, "Well, I'll continue to take the work as long as they'll give it to me in here, but I also have to remind people that I exist outside of this venue," and
And then, so the segue then into Druid, how did that come about for you?
I got a phone call from Danny Erskine asking me, did I want a job? And he was company manager at the time. So Danny was actually the first full-time company manager for Druid. Paula Tierney had been doing the job on a kind of a case-by-case basis before him, on sort of show by show, but Danny actually was the first person that they employed full-time. And then Richie O'Sullivan was in there after Danny, and now I'm there after Richie. But Danny rang me and he said, "We need somebody to come on board and do Waiting for Godot." And Godot had already been done the year before with a different stage management team. Richie had called it, and Anne Kyle was the company manager. Anne Kyle was in there for a little while as company manager as well, yes, of course. But Anne had gone back to the Abbey, and Richie wasn't available, and I came on as the DSM on a show that already existed. I'd never worked for Druid before. I was terrified because I had never worked for Gary. I had sort of met the four guys here, there, and everywhere. The only one of the four of them that I'd worked with was Rory. And I was terrified because I was going into a room of like theatre hard hitters, and on a show that they had done already. They obviously all knew each other really well, and the show had been a great success. That had done its sort of world tour, and then also it had done 2 weeks of the Arts Festival in Galway and been lauded and everything. And they were bringing it back into the Abbey. So Danny rang me and I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And then it just kind of kept going from there. And we went to Spoleto Festival with it. We've been, then we went to New York. We did a big couple of years ago while Richie was company manager. I was still DSM on the show. We did 7 weeks in the States with it. And then sort of went from that, did a couple of small sort of things with Druid, sort of just filling in on bits and bobs, and then did Richard III as the DSM. And then the job opportunity of company manager came up, and I applied and took the job. And here I am 2 years later.
You kind of go, not only starting with Druid, but starting on such mammoth shows. Do you know what I mean? The Druid having already, as you say, kind of got the accolades, and then Richard, which is a whole other kind of beast after doing all the Shakespeare's, the history plays before. But I mean, there's a certain, from chatting to you, from knowing you, there's a kind of certain calm, doggedness about you. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like going, there's, and I mean that as a huge compliment. It's kind of
no,
like,
I appreciate it. Thank you.
but that you're there, and you're there with both feet on the ground. You know what I mean? It's kind of, there's a firmness about your presence, which I say, is an absolute blessing in any room. But I say, does that serve you well within yourself then, as you kind of progress into different rooms? That you kind of, there's a solidity there within yourself?
I think so, and I think as well, like not only as I go into different rooms, but actually the older I get, the more I sort of, I've become more sure of myself. And at the end of the day, I've done enough work with enough different types of people that I know myself, what, as I said earlier, what I can handle, what I can't handle, and also, my thing always, not always, but in recent years, and particularly with working for Druid, because I've had people kind of come up to me and say, it's my first gig with Druid, or I'm a bit nervous, whatever. And like, we all have imposter syndrome, everybody does, and various different things in their life. But at the end of the day, I always feel with Druid is that we're all there because we're the best at what we do, and we're all, Gary Hines is a very smart woman. She has surrounded herself with people that are very good at their jobs, and I mean that in every aspect. Everybody that works in the office is fab. The cast that she surrounds herself with, the production teams that she surrounds herself with, and we wouldn't be there if we weren't good at it. And I don't mean that to sound arrogant, but at the end of the day.
But I think I think that's actually can be applied across the board in the arts, in any form of life, or form of career. But I think this is the arts we're talking about, because I think I always use the acting part. And I think once you've got a gig, you've passed the audition, so it's kind of like, and it's a great
done, actually.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So it's kind of, you're in there, but again, that imposter syndrome, and it never goes away. But never. No. I think in a way, well, I've kind of, the trick I've used of myself, it's not imposter syndrome. That's your creativity. That's your kind of going. It's a future bit. So it's not worrying. It's not worrying about whether other people will catch you on. It's more about kind of going, God, will this come again for me? Rather than So I think it's but I think it's. And do you like going to the theatre yourself? Apart from work, so you still have that interest in it.
Yeah, and I mean, I did. As I say, I mentioned my parents earlier, who are opera people. They're also theatre people. Like I have an aunt that's very involved. Like as an audience member, she goes to everything, and she travels to see things, and she takes a trip to London every 6 months, and she goes to see 4 or 5 things in a weekend. So I grew up with this. I grew up with theatre. Not necessarily that I grew up, like, I'm not from a theatre family, or but it was around. So like, going into a theatre on the first day wasn't a scary thing, because it wasn't an alien place for me. I grew up as a teenager. I would be taken to things in the Gate or the Abbey or the Gaiety or whatever. So as I say, it wasn't alien. And I think. Yeah, I think that's. I mean, one of the things that I know that Access do a lot of hard work on, and I think it's really important, is getting people, particularly young people, into the theatre, and just bashing down that sort of scary big door. In any theatre, like the foyer is probably the scariest place in any theatre, because if you're somebody that doesn't go to the theatre, it could seem like a very big building and a big scary building, but actually, once you get that out of somebody's mind, and even that in itself is kind of an imposter syndrome, should I be here, and I just think the more people that get to theatre, the better, of any age. So get them in, get them young,
But I think that also, I mean, I was on a call, one of the theatre forum calls there last week, and you know, I think it applies to audiences, the public as well as artists. But you know, it's one thing how someone phrased it. I'm going to paraphrase this. I think it was Rory O'Donovan kind of said that it's one thing saying you have an open door policy, but you have to realize that you can actually walk out the door rather than
Yeah.
rather than people walking in. I think that's so true, and so true. Even when Axis was kind of built years ago, it's obviously a glass-fronted building.
Yeah.
And that was obviously architecturally to be open, but that freaked people out at the beginning because they'd be seen in it.
Yeah.
Because in a community that was made up of kind of flats and tower blocks, and that people all
Mm.
sense of containment and privacy, and so if you have,
Yeah.
I'm fascinated, excuse me, in relation to kind of that. There's so many boundaries to people to get involved, from a career professionals looking for help, or whether it be Joe and Joe's public. And I think we take on, we assume way too much in our own industry, that people should know what we're doing. And I think I suppose in some ways going back to the beginning of this conversation in relation to, I am very taken by that those videos of the idea of videos of.
I'll find them. Don't you worry. I'll send them on to you.
But that sense of the art of stage management, or the art of kind of company management, that it is, you know, that it's obviously it's very nuts and bolts, but the fluidity between that is kind of the connection to the piece. And is that so? Take me then in relation to company management now, and that different string, or that different kind of party, and now that kind of, what's happened there in your head with that?
It's kind of a strange one, because there aren't that many of us in Ireland. Like it's a sort of a thing that there's me at Druid, there's Danny at the Abbey, and Paula Tierney is company manager at INO, and sort of we've all come from a stage management background, but it's interesting because a lot of companies in the UK would have a company manager as a matter of course, but here historically the job doesn't really exist because there wasn't the money, so the stage manager would just do all the company managing stuff as well, you know. And I suppose I've done in more recent years, I've done a lot of work for companies that have a company manager, you know, even before I was working with Druid. So like, and actually, sorry, there is a company manager down in Wexford. Most opera companies would have one because there's a lot of bodies, you know. But it's a very different discipline. I find it interesting that, as I say, myself, Paula and Danny are all stage managers, because while it does absolutely come from a stage management background, it's a different thing. You do a lot of, like, people ask me what I do, you know, and at the end of the day, the bottom line of my job is that I mind the humans, you know, and I mind, you know, somebody's sick, I bring them to the doctor, I book the hotels, I book the flights, I book, you know, I mean, we might not be going on any flights anytime soon, but officially that's what I do. And I think, you know, so it is a different, it's kind of there's a bit of a pastoral care element there to company management that not all stage managers would want to do or want to be involved in. You know, there's a lot of stage managers that go, well, you know, I love stage managing, don't want to do the company manager stuff, you know, and that's fine. But it taps into a different thing, you know. It's a very different part of the wheelhouse, I suppose, for everyone.
And do you find yourself, I mean, like, again, it's a kind of part of the wheelhouse, a great kind of analogy, but that sense as well of all this work going to, you know, making the piece of work, which is the end point. But do you get a sense from yourself then, like the picture of you kind of backstage, like looking at places you can kind of see the audience, that's still, that kind of craving obviously is still there for that kind of in the live piece?
Yeah, absolutely. Because at the end of the day, without the live piece, none of us have any jobs, you know. But I think it's, you know, the other thing that is interesting about Druid that is different to, if I'm honest, I don't know how it works at INO because I haven't worked for INO, but for Danny and the Abbey, for example, so in Druid, I am the company manager, but I also run technical rehearsals. So for quite a lot of other companies, the stage manager would do that. The company manager at Druid has always been a stage manager. because we understand how tech works, and what needs to happen, and scheduling and all that sort of stuff. But for example, in the Abbey, they have Danny as the company manager, and then they have a company stage manager on each show who specifically minds that show. So like Danny would drop in on tech, but he's not running the tech, you know. So that's a sort of an anomaly for Druid, in that like I am there running the show, so that the DSM, all they're doing is not all they're doing, what they're doing is focusing on the show, and you know, focusing on the book, because you know, some shows you really like. I mean, when I think about shows that I did where you're trying to put a book together and do a tech, and then you have to go home and send the schedule out for the next day, like, it's exhausting and it's too much stuff to be doing. And you know, I have to say, I think the model of company manager, DSM, ASM really works, and unfortunately in Ireland, funding means that isn't always the case. Quite often it's stage manager who also does all the company manager stuff, and an ASM, because the companies can't afford to have 3 people on a show.
No, I think you're absolutely right. But also think for you, but that sounds like something which is fantastic, because you're kind of plugged back into the work as well. Do you know what I mean? You're plugged back into the post for that kind of technical rehearsal period as well.
Yeah, which is pretty crack.
But you're right, because you know, I think there's been different structures in different companies, and you know, and different funding structures in Ireland, particularly over the last, say, 12 years, since you know, a lot of company structures were kind of, you know, had to be taken apart. But you know, I think we spoke about COVID at the beginning of this, but you know, that during this period, and I think it's hugely important, as we maybe not rebuild, as we actually make the industry that we want to have, rather than trying to rebuild, is actually that those roles are as important as any other roles, because unless you decide they are, then they will never be, no matter how much money there is. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's kind of,
I completely agree.
And that's about, it's as much about choice going forward as it is about kind of money. And you're right, you know, in this time that we're in, it's important to be amplifying, and that you know, that's why it's great. The other, I think it's fantastic seeing not just Theatre Forum, or you know, not just National Campaign for the Arts, but the whole EPIC and the whole other contextual organisations going into government, that we're all going in together. It's the first time. That's huge. It's the first time that's ever happened.
Absolutely. And I think you're right. I think, you know, that sort of idea of rebuilding, or but actually, and again, I don't want this to be negative, but there has been an awful lot wrong with the theatre industry for a long time, and this is a really good time to take stock of what we want to keep and actually what we want to change. And I think, as I say, that structure for me, the company manager, stage manager, or DSM, ASM, really works. I speak from an absolute place of privilege with that, because I work for a company that can afford to do that, and I'm well aware of that. But as you say, if we don't ask, we don't get. So, and I know a lot of stage managers that come off a tech week or come off a run, and they're so tired because they've been, you know, overworked, really is the only word to describe it, because at the end of the day, they're kind of doing the work of 2 people, when they should be able to call the show, do the DSM stuff, and the company manager stuff, i.e. the schedules, the booking, the minding the people, the this, the that, the talking to the director, the, you know, holding, you know, meetings, all that sort of stuff, and leave that to the company manager, and let the DSM technically run the show, you know. And as I say, if we don't ask, or if we don't bring it up, we don't get it. And the other thing about it is that if the money was there, it also allows for more people to be employed, which is great as well, you know.
Yeah, and also I think, you know, not, I think as we emerge from, and we don't know how long this is going to take, but I would be of a firm belief that come like into this time next year, I really think as an industry, whatever that means, or as a, you know, a body of different people, we can have no excuses this time next year for things that still don't work. Because, you know, I mean, it's funny, my staff here, I've been going on for years going, God, I wish I was here when Access was opening. And I'm kind of going, well, now you are. Now you're actually reopening it. So
yeah, we're kind of all starting from the ground up again a bit, aren't we?
and with all that learning, with all the stuff that didn't work, stuff that did work, stuff that maybe didn't work enough. So I think if we're still having the same conversations in July 2000 or August 2021, they're not mistakes, they're choices.
Absolutely. And I think as well, like at the moment, now is the time. And I think I've been really heartened by all the work that people are doing and everything because of this. I think now is the time that everybody just needs to leave ego at the door and you know, do the work and put the shoulder to the wheel and you know, have the meetings and talk to people and, you know, and talk to everybody, like talk to the actors, talk to, you know, the stage managers, the production managers. And I think that's happening. But we have to do it as an industry, because if we don't do it as an industry, nobody's going to listen to us. And the more voices that we have involved in it, the louder we'll be. And I think that it is happening. And I think that sort of government are beginning to hear us a bit better. But, you know, it's important, and there's a lot of people involved in this industry, and a lot of people's livelihoods rely on this industry. And, you know, it's worth us all getting together.
No, that absolutely is. And I think it's beholden then on us to actually structure it in a way that's sustainable. So it's not just about the money, it's about us as an industry going, okay, and be honest and kind of go, that's not working, or that's brilliant, or that's not, you know, and then kind of move forward with it. Come here, I'm going to leave you with that. That was an absolute joy to chat to you. And it's funny you mentioned being associated with things. I kind of presumed you were in Galway.
No, I'm in Dublin. Yeah, everybody keeps saying, oh, the amount of times over this I've been asked, oh, you know, are you over in Galway? I haven't been in Galway since we did Cherry Orchard back in March. So hoping to get over there in the next little while, because we're going to start rehearsal very shortly for something new, which is really exciting, which will be announced next week. So. Cool.
Listen, thanks a million for
Mark, thank you so much. I would talk theatre to you anytime. So yeah.
Send me the email with the links, because I feel a Geek Fest coming on myself as well.
Get yourself a nice glass of wine and watch somebody call the Ring Cycle this evening.
See you later.
Thanks, Mark. Bye.